In today's episode, we're diving into the most horrifying shark attacks ever recorded. From a spearfisher who vanished off Oahu's north shore, to a British tourist fatally mauled on a remote Australian beach. It was August 4th, 2017. The Florida sun was beating down mercilessly on Jensen Beach as families sought refuge in the cooling embrace of the sea. The beach stretched endlessly in both directions, dotted with colorful umbrellas and the laughter of children building sandcastles. For the Ruiz family, this was meant to be a celebration, their first beach vacation since Emily's father had returned from his military deployment overseas. 9-year-old Emily Ruiz stood at the water's edge. The shy girl from Orlando had always been fascinated by marine life, spending countless hours sketching dolphins and whales in her worn sketchbook. Her parents mentioned that she was extremely happy that day, finally experiencing the ocean she had only seen in pictures and documentaries. The Ruiz family had chosen a quieter section of Jensen Beach, away from the crowded main area with its vigilant lifeguards and safety equipment. Emily's parents and extended family were busy setting up their beach camp, arranging chairs and preparing lunch on a portable grill. The adults were distracted by conversation and the logistics of managing a large family gathering. Their attention divided between unpacking coolers and applying sunscreen to squirming children. Emily's 15-year-old cousin, Maria, had been tasked with watching the younger children near the water. As the tide receded, it revealed a shallow sandbar extending about 50 feet from shore, a perfect playground for the kids to splash and explore. Emily waded out confidently in her bright pink swimsuit. Around noon, as the sun reached its peak intensity, Emily spotted something that seemingly excited her. A dark triangular fin cut through the water, moving parallel to the shore in the deeper channel beyond the sandbar. Emily pointed toward the approaching fin, calling out to her cousin, thinking it was a dolphin she had spotted. Maria seemed uncertain about what she was seeing, but not wanting to dampen Emily's enthusiasm. The fin disappeared beneath the surface, then reappeared closer to shore. Emily began wading deeper, her small legs carrying her toward what she believed was a friendly dolphin. The water rose from her ankles to her knees, then to her waist, as she moved beyond the safety of the sandbar. Her cousin called after her with growing concern, but Emily was transfixed by the possibility of encountering the marine animal she had dreamed about. A lifeguard stationed at the main beach area, nearly a quarter-mile south, noticed the distinctive fin pattern through his binoculars and immediately recognized that it was a black-tip shark. He blew his whistle frantically and began running north along the beach, but the distance was too great, and the warning came too late. Blacktip sharks are among the most common species found along Florida's coast, growing up to 8 feet in length and weighing over 200 pounds. These powerful hunters are equipped with razor-sharp teeth designed to slice through flesh and bone with surgical precision. Their streamlined bodies can propel them through water at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour, making them formidable ambush predators. Most dangerously, blacktips are known for their aggressive feeding behavior in shallow water, often mistaking splashing humans for their preferred prey of small fish and rays. The blacktip shark struck from below, its powerful jaws clamping down on Emily's upper thigh with devastating force. The impact drove her underwater momentarily, the clear water around her instantly turning red as the shark's serrated teeth tore through muscle and bone. Emily resurfaced screaming, her small body thrashing in panic and pain as the shark maintained its grip. Then the predator shook its head violently, a behavior designed to tear chunks of flesh from larger prey. Maria's screams pierced the air as she witnessed the horrific scene unfolding just yards away. Several beachgoers who had been enjoying the afternoon sun immediately recognized the emergency and rushed into the water, while some dialed 911. Their splashing and shouting managed to confuse the shark momentarily, causing it to release its initial grip. But as Emily struggled toward shore, weakened by blood loss and shock, the blacktip struck again. This time its jaws found her lower abdomen, inflicting deadly wounds. An off-duty emergency medical technician who had been relaxing with his family immediately took charge of the rescue effort. He and several other adults managed to pull Emily from the water and onto the beach, where he attempted to control the massive bleeding using beach towels and his emergency training. Emily's small body had already begun showing signs of severe shock, her skin pale and clammy, her breathing rapid and shallow. The paramedic crew arrived within 8 minutes of the emergency call, but despite their advanced life support efforts during transport to the hospital, Emily's injuries were too severe. The combination of massive blood loss, tissue damage, and traumatic shock had overwhelmed her small body's ability to survive. Emily Ruiz was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital, becoming another tragic statistic in the ongoing conflict between humans and the ocean's apex predators. The aftermath brought renewed warnings about blacktip shark activity along Jensen Beach, with Martin County Ocean Rescue posting temporary advisory signs and increasing patrols over the following weekend. However, no official beach closure was implemented, and the area remained open to swimmers. Emily's funeral was held privately in Orlando 5 days later, attended only by close relatives at a small church service. The family declined interviews, and local authorities respected their wishes by withholding specific details from press releases. It was October 16, 2016, and the waters off Oahu's north shore appeared deceptively calm. By sunrise, the wind was still, visibility stretched beyond 50 feet, and there had been no shark sightings in weeks. For 3 local divers preparing for their morning hunt, danger seemed impossibly distant. Nathan Kipa, a 26-year-old ventilation technician from Honolulu, was known for his meticulous nature both on land and in the water. He had discovered spearfishing in his teens, initially for sustenance, later for the discipline it demanded. His dive gear was always immaculate, floatline perfectly coiled, spear gun maintained to perfection. Friends relied on Nathan's cautious nature, often looking to him when conditions became questionable. He rarely ventured beyond familiar reef edges, and on this particular stretch of coastline, he had logged dozens of successful dives without incident. Nathan had requested this Sunday off weeks in advance. The weather forecast promised ideal conditions, and he had committed to bringing fresh fish to his uncle's family gathering. 2 close friends, both experienced divers, accompanied him that morning. They planned to work in pairs, but understood that separation was inevitable once fish began moving through the reef. Their objective was straightforward: fill the cooler with catch and return to shore by noon. The reef at Kayaker Point extends narrow and drops off precipitously. Beyond 165 feet, sandy slopes descend into deeper channels bordered by coral formations. That morning, crystal clear water revealed goatfish and wrasse threading through the reef structure, drawing confident divers toward deeper hunting grounds. Approximately 1 hour into their dive, Nathan signaled his intention to track a snapper moving downslope. His diving partner acknowledged with a thumbs up before surfacing to reposition. The third diver in the group, Kaleo, remained closer to the reef ledge and kept occasional visual contact with Nathan as he descended. He later recalled seeing Nathan pause mid-column, then begin his controlled descent, his body calm and balanced just beneath the surface. What Nathan likely didn't fully comprehend was the nature of the apex predator that ruled these waters. Tiger sharks patrol Hawaiian reefs with deadly efficiency, adults reaching 10 to 14 feet in length and weighing up to 1,400 pounds. Their bite force exceeds 1,000 pounds per square inch, capable of severing limbs in a single strike. Most critically, they are drawn to areas of fish activity, particularly where blood or erratic movements might indicate wounded prey. Warnings had been posted 2 weeks earlier near Waimea Bay regarding aggressive sharks approaching divers carrying fish, but those signs had been removed after no follow-up sightings. Nathan and his companions, though experienced, had completed several calm dives in recent weeks and assumed the risk had passed. At 8:24 a.m., Kaleo spotted Nathan surfacing. He appeared to be adjusting equipment but had become detached from his float line. However, from roughly 90 feet away, Kaleo saw a tiger shark surge upward from the blue. The shark struck with sudden force, its jaws locking across Nathan's lower back and abdomen. Nathan was lifted violently out of the water, his body contorting. Kaleo heard a short, high-pitched scream cut off mid-breath. Then, the shark shook its head with brutal torque, easily ripping through his flesh. It pulled him under in a froth of red water and foam. Seconds later, Nathan resurfaced, thrashing. One leg hanging limp, shredded at the thigh, wetsuit peeled open along his ribs. The shark struck again from below, seizing Nathan by the shoulder and neck. Kaleo, as the shark, pull him under a final time. A plume of blood and tissue rose to the surface, followed by small pieces of wetsuit. Then everything went still. Recognizing the extreme danger, Kaleo and the other diver abandoned their remaining equipment and swam rapidly toward shore. Lifeguards at nearby Pupukia Beach received their emergency alert at 8:41 a.m., launching rescue watercraft within 10 minutes. The Coast Guard deployed both helicopter and boat assets to join the search effort. At 9:27 a.m., aerial observers located fragments of Nathan's torn wetsuit drifting near the reef edge, along with a single detached diving fin. Despite extensive searching, no additional trace of Nathan was recovered. Authorities immediately cleared the area of watercraft while closing 3 beaches to recreational diving for 48 hours. New shark warning signs appeared across the coastline, citing an aggressive tiger shark encounter. Local news stations covered Nathan's death briefly, emphasizing the statistical rarity of such incidents. 2 days later, friends gathered for a quiet shoreline vigil near the equipment recovery site. Nathan's parents, both retired educators from Hilo, declined all interview requests. His uncle later confirmed that Nathan's employer, a small refrigeration company, covered memorial expenses and provided grief counseling for affected co-workers. It was December 9, 2013, and the sand at Almonte Beach stretched windswept and pristine beneath the rising southern sun. No lifeguards patrolled these waters, and no cell towers provided signal. Here, Peter Allen stood alone on the sand, preparing to enter unfamiliar surf. Peter, a 39-year-old high school history teacher from Leeds, had used his long service leave to explore Australia's southern coast by bus and rental van, tracing the shoreline from Victoria to South Australia. A self-taught nature photographer, he regularly shared wildlife images on a modest online forum and never traveled without his second-hand Nikon DSLR and GoPro camera. After 23 days in the country, camping in national parks and documenting native birds and marsupials, he had been recording voice memos for his students back home. His final audio note, saved the previous evening, mentioned one last beach hike before heading north. That morning, Peter arrived at Coffin Bay National Park and parked near a barely marked trail leading to Almonte Beach. Standard signage listed typical regulations: no fires, pack out trash, dangerous surf, but made no specific mention of sharks. He walked several hundred yards along the high tide line before stopping where dunes curved inland. No other vehicles occupied the car park. With temperatures pushing 90 degrees Fahrenheit and several hours of hiking behind him, Peter sought relief from the heat. He left his backpack beneath a tree, stripped down to his boxers, and entered the surf with the GoPro secured to his wrist. However, Peter couldn't have known that he was entering one of the world's most active great white shark habitats. Great whites can exceed 20 feet in length and weigh over 4,400 pounds. They possess a bite force exceeding 4,000 psi, strong enough to bite through fiberglass hulls. Unlike tropical reef sharks, great whites are ambush predators that strike from below with explosive power, often breaching fully out of the water. Though most attacks on humans are exploratory, they often prove fatal due to catastrophic trauma and blood loss. And unfortunately, the waters off South Australia's Eyre Peninsula are prime great white territory. December marks peak seasonal movement around seal rookeries, and recent drone footage near Yangi Bay, less than 5 miles away, had captured a large shark circling seals just 3 days earlier. Local fishermen had reported several fin sightings offshore in the weeks leading up to Peter's visit. People in Coffin Bay understood that Almonte Beach was unsuitable for swimming. Wildlife officers had issued internal shark risk advisories to state agencies, but no formal beach closures were in place. The park's signage hadn't been updated in over a year, and the visitor center was closed that day due to staffing shortages. Peter would have had no reason to know the water was unsafe. At 10:42 a.m., German tourists Birgit and Lucas Hoffmann were walking along the shoreline when they heard shouting. Scanning the beach, they spotted a lone man waist-deep in the surf, appearing to struggle with something in the water. He turned to wade back, but before he could take a full step, the water around him exploded. They saw it clearly. A massive shark lunged upward from the trough behind the man, striking from below with its jaws clamped across his upper legs and pelvis. Peter was hoisted almost fully out of the water. A ragged scream cut the air as the shark thrashed violently, shaking him side to side. Lucas said he saw flesh rip away from Peter's left thigh in sheets. Peter's arms beat the surface as he tried to pull away, but the shark released him only to surge again. It clamped down across his back and chest and dragged him beneath the waves in a curtain of red. Birgit later described seeing his legs kicking once, bare feet thrashing above the foam, before the water swallowed him whole. The sea frothed red. Nothing else surfaced. Only a wide slick of blood and shredded clothing remained in the shallows. The Hoffmans ran back through the dunes to reach their vehicle. They drove east until they found a signal and contacted emergency services. Park rangers arrived 30 minutes later, and the beach had returned to deceptive stillness. They found a torn backpack and pieces of nylon strapping from a camera mount, washed up near the high tide line. The water offered no trace of the victim. Helicopter surveillance flights were launched that afternoon, but failed to spot any sharks or human remains. Though uncommon, full body loss can occur when a shark makes multiple strikes or pulls the victim into deeper water. Offshore drum lines were deployed by South Australia's Primary Industries Department, but no animals were caught. They identified Peter through his belongings, and the Australian consular officers notified his family in Leeds 2 days later. His high school held a quiet memorial service, with students lighting candles in the school auditorium. In response to the incident, South Australia's Department for Environment, Water and Natural Resources issued a temporary closure of Almonte Beach and installed new multilingual shark risk signage at all major park entrances. It was May 21, 2015, and the early morning waters of False Bay stretched mirror-still beneath a pale sky. The air was just beginning to warm as sunrise broke over the Cape Peninsula. From shore, the sea appeared deceptively peaceful. Flat swells, no whitecaps, nothing to suggest that nearly a mile offshore, something violent was about to unfold. Thabo Mahlangu, 33, had paddled alone that morning from a familiar beach just south of Simonstown. A part-time fisheries observer and lifelong Capetonian, he divided his time between local contracting work and documenting pelagic fish patterns for regional biologists. Though he had studied marine science briefly in his 20s, he left university to support his siblings after his father's death. Those who knew him described Thabo as soft-spoken and solitary, someone who found peace at sea. He maintained detailed notes in a waterproof field book and had recently been tracking tuna activity in the bay. Solo kayaking was routine for Thabo. He preferred early, quiet launches, departing well before dawn to reach prime observation points as fish activity peaked. Though he carried a handline, he rarely fished. That morning offered ideal conditions: light wind, 61 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Celsius, water, and visibility of 33 to 39 feet. He wore a red life vest and clipped himself to the kayak with a waist tether. His plan was simple: drift just west of Roman Rock Lighthouse, then return by mid-morning. But False Bay serves as a migratory corridor for various species, including the short-fin Mako shark. Among the fastest fish in the ocean, Makos can reach burst speeds over 45 miles per hour. Adults typically measure 8 to 10.5 feet and weigh up to 1,100 pounds. Typically found offshore, Makos sometimes enter coastal waters while chasing tuna or mackerel. They often strike upward at speed, occasionally breaching entirely. No shark advisories had been issued that week. Tuna activity was strong, but no large predators had been sighted. The area sat outside seasonal great white hotspots, and the mild currents made it ideal for observation. Thabo had seen tuna breaching the day before and hoped to track their movement. His kayak was bright orange for visibility, and he usually kept his legs tucked inside the hull. However, at around 7:10 a.m., the crew of a handline boat was drifting a quarter-mile southeast of Roman Rock when they saw a large splash off the port bow. A deckhand raised binoculars and spotted a Mako breaching, likely chasing bait fish. Moments later, they saw a kayak twist violently as something struck from below. The impact flipped the kayak instantly. Thabo surfaced on his back, still tethered by the waist, arms clawing at the overturned hull. The Mako circled tight, and without warning it slammed into the underside of the kayak, ripping away nearly a foot of the hull. Thabo's right hand slipped off the hull as he kicked blindly beneath the surface. The shark reappeared again, its jaws wide open, and struck him above the hips. His scream turned shrill and short as the Mako's snout broke the surface, dragging him under by the torso. Blood surged up in thick plumes, darkening the water almost instantly. The crew radioed the National Sea Rescue Institute in Simonstown, just under 2.5 miles away. A response boat launched within 12 minutes and reached the scene as blood still swirled on the surface. They recovered Thabo's body 40 meters from the impact site, badly mauled, missing both legs below the thigh, and with deep lacerations to the torso. Fisheries officers examined the damage and matched the pattern to a 9 to 10.5 foot Mako shark. Forensics confirmed death by massive blood loss and traumatic injury, consistent with a high-speed predatory strike. Thabo's funeral was held in Gugulethu, attended by family, friends, and colleagues from the Department of Environmental Affairs. A short obituary misidentified the shark as a blue, later corrected by local biologists. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment called the attack extraordinarily rare. Patrols increased for 10 days, but no drumlines were deployed. His name was added to the National Memorial List for fallen environmental staff. It was March 3, 2018, and the waters off Isla Espiritu Santo sparkled beneath a clear midday sun, drawing boats and snorkelers to the rocky coastline. The surface appeared deceptively calm, just shadows beneath the reef and occasional shimmers of fish. Nothing at first glance suggested the violence that would soon erupt beneath the swells. Lorena Diaz, 30, had arrived from Mexico City 4 days earlier, seeking respite from her demanding schedule. A certified dive instructor with 10 years of experience, she had worked at dive shops in Playa del Carmen and Cozumel before returning to the capital to teach beginner pool courses. This trip represented her first break from work in months. She had booked a half-day snorkeling tour to Isla Espiritu Santo, renowned for its crystal-clear waters, playful sea lions, and shallow coral ledges. Though more comfortable in full scuba gear, Lorena was confident in open water and had previously swum alongside nurse sharks in the Caribbean. The tour group that day consisted of 6 guests and 2 guides aboard a small vessel designed for short-range coastal excursions. The boat carried minimal safety equipment. No marine radio, no trauma kit, just basic snorkeling gear. Lorena chatted easily with fellow tourists and asked one guide if she could attempt breath-hold dives during the reef stop. The guide agreed but reminded her to avoid the deeper channels marked by floating rope barriers. The area beyond dropped precipitously to 80 to 100 feet and featured dangerous lateral currents. She acknowledged the warning before entering the water with another guest. The shoreline along Isla Espiritu Santo transitions from sandy coves to jagged underwater shelves. Near the reef, rocky fingers extend outward before plunging into open blue water. Fish movements are dense in these areas, sardines, jacks, and grunts creating constant activity that occasionally attracts larger predators. The group initially remained within the rope boundary, photographing reef fish and observing marine life. Then Lorena spotted a sudden silver flash and kicked after it. A small school of green jacks had darted just beyond the safety barrier. She followed, disappearing past the float line. But she didn't know that there are dangerous hunters patrolling these deeper waters. Bull sharks are among the ocean's most formidable coastal predators. These stocky, powerful sharks often exceed 8 feet in length and can weigh over 660 pounds. They possess a bite force exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch, powerful enough to crush a sea turtle's shell. Most critically, they are known for their aggressive feeding behavior and territorial nature, particularly in confined or murky waters. One of the guides positioned on the boat observed Lorena surface near the rope barrier, approximately 65 feet beyond the safety zone, before she suddenly jerked upright in the water. Her arms flailed frantically as she began screaming, loud and desperate, clutching her right leg. Blood appeared almost immediately, turning the water around her a cloudy crimson. The other guests swimming nearby panicked and began shouting for help. From the deck, the guide spotted a dark shape circling just beneath the surface, moving in tight loops near Lorena's thrashing body. She attempted to swim toward safety, but her movements were uncoordinated and weakening. The other tourist, now close enough to reach her, grabbed Lorena's arm and pulled her toward the boat while kicking frantically. The shark made no second attack, but its dorsal fin surfaced briefly before vanishing into deeper water. The guides hauled both swimmers aboard by their arms. Lorena had suffered catastrophic injuries to her right calf. The bite had torn away most of the lower muscle tissue and ruptured a major blood vessel. The wound was devastating, with arterial blood soaking through towels wrapped hastily around her leg. She drifted in and out of consciousness, growing pale and shivering from shock and blood loss. With no radio aboard, one guide shouted for pressure to be maintained on the wound, while the other started the motor. The boat reached the shore 20 minutes later, but by the time they reached the hospital, Lorena was unresponsive. Paramedics pronounced her dead on arrival, citing massive blood loss as the primary cause. The bite had severed her posterior tibial artery, and based on estimated timing and distance, responders determined she had likely died within 12 to 15 minutes of being pulled from the water. No shark was targeted or captured following the incident. A joint statement from Baja's Environmental Agency and regional marine biologists confirmed the attack as consistent with defensive or opportunistic behavior by a bull shark. They emphasized that the area beyond rope barriers was known for occasional predator activity, particularly during baitfish movements. Her remains were transported back to Mexico City under coordination of the local tourism office. A private funeral was held with only family and close friends present. Following an internal investigation, local maritime authorities issued directives requiring all small tour operators to carry working marine radios, basic first aid kits, and designate lead guides responsible for safety decisions. No fines were issued, but several permits were temporarily suspended pending compliance checks. The morning of August 12, 2014, dawned with perfect beach conditions at Sand City Beach, California. Golden sunlight danced across the Pacific surface, and gentle offshore breezes created the kind of pristine waves that made families flock to the coastline. For the Walsh family, this was meant to be the perfect ending to their summer vacation. One last day of ocean fun before returning to their routine in Monterey. Emma Walsh, 7, and her little sister, Chloe, 5, were the kind of children who lived for the water. Both were confident swimmers who had spent the entire week mastering their boogie boarding skills at safer, more crowded beaches. Their father, Dr. Michael Walsh, was a marine biologist at the prestigious Monterey Bay Aquarium, making him intimately familiar with the local marine ecosystem, including the great white sharks that patrolled these waters. Their mother, Sarah, was an elementary school teacher who had carefully planned every detail of their vacation. The girls were inseparable, with Emma taking on the protective big sister role, while Chloe's infectious laughter could be heard echoing across any beach they visited. The family had spent the morning packing their beach gear one final time, the girls excitedly discussing their plans to catch the biggest wave ever on their last day. Dr. Walsh had checked the marine conditions report that morning, noting the presence of elephant seals in the area, but dismissing it as routine information. Emma's board was bright pink with purple stripes, while Chloe's was yellow with cartoon own dolphins, gifts from their grandparents the previous Christmas. But on this fateful day, the family made a decision that would change their lives forever. Instead of returning to their usual crowded beach, they chose an isolated section of Sand City Beach during the late afternoon golden hour, precisely when great white sharks become most active in their hunt for prey. Dr. Walsh, despite his expertise, was focused on giving his daughters one last perfect beach experience and overlooked the warning signs, elephant seals hauling out nearby, the isolated location, and the time of day when predators ruled the waters. At 5:20 p.m., as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Emma and Chloe paddled their boogie boards 75 yards offshore into 12 feet of crystal-clear water. Their dark wetsuits and the silhouettes of their boards created the perfect illusion. From below, they looked exactly like young elephant seals, the preferred prey of the massive great white sharks that patrolled this coastline. The girls were laughing and calling to each other, completely unaware that they were being observed from the depths below. Great white sharks possess one of nature's most sophisticated sensory systems, capable of detecting a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water and sensing the electrical impulses of a beating heart from over 100 yards away. When hunting, they rely primarily on vision and mistake identification, approaching potential prey from below, where the silhouette against the surface light triggers their investigative response. Their hunting strategy is simple but effective: a single powerful bite to determine if the target is suitable prey, followed by retreat to allow the victim to weaken before returning to feed. A 14-foot great white, drawn by the nearby seal colony, approached from the depths with the silent efficiency that had made its species the ocean's apex predator for millions of years. The attack came without warning. The great white struck Emma first in a classic investigative bite, its massive jaws clamping down on her and her board with enough force to launch her small body through the air. Her terrified scream pierced the afternoon calm as she hit the water, blood immediately beginning to cloud the pristine blue around her. The shark, following its instinctual behavior, immediately released Emma and retreated to assess whether she was suitable prey. But the damage was already done. The single bite had caused massive trauma to her torso and leg. Chloe, only 20 feet away, heard her sister's cry and began paddling frantically toward her, her movement and Emma's blood in the water maintaining the shark's interest in the area. Dr. Walsh, who had been watching proudly from shore 200 yards away, immediately dove into the surf and began swimming toward his daughters with desperate strokes. Sarah screamed from the beach, alerting other beachgoers to the emergency unfolding in the water. Nearby surfers, alerted by the screams and commotion, paddled toward the scene as fast as they could. The great white, now confused by the multiple targets and increased activity, made a second investigative approach toward Chloe before ultimately departing the area. Typical behavior when great whites determine their targets aren't seals. The rescue that followed was heroic and swift. Surfers reached the girls within 3 minutes, immediately pulling them from the water and applying pressure to their wounds while calling for emergency assistance. Emma, who had sustained the more severe injuries from the direct bite, was airlifted to a trauma center where she underwent multiple surgeries. Despite the medical team's best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries after 2 days in intensive care. Chloe survived with severe lacerations to her leg and arm, requiring months of physical therapy but making a full recovery. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the marine biology community, with Dr. Walsh struggling to reconcile his scientific understanding of shark behavior with the personal devastation of losing his daughter. The family eventually became advocates for shark conservation and beach safety education, understanding that the great white had simply been following its natural instinct. October 3rd, 2015, brought an eerie calm to Surf Beach in Lompoc, California. A thick marine layer had rolled in overnight, creating the kind of mysterious, fog-shrouded conditions that experienced surfers both loved and feared. The visibility was poor, but the waves were clean and consistent, exactly the kind of setup that drew dedicated surfers to paddle out before the rest of the world awakened. Tyler Brooks, 22, was the epitome of a California surfer, a UC Santa Barbara student student with sun-bleached hair and the kind of easy confidence that came from years of riding waves, Tyler had been surfing competitively since high school and worked part-time at a local surf shop to fund his passion. He was known among his friends for his dawn patrol sessions, those early morning surfs when the ocean belonged entirely to those brave enough to face the unknown conditions. Tyler had been surfing this particular break for 2 years and considered himself intimately familiar with its moods and dangers. That morning, Tyler had woken at 5:30 a.m. in his shared apartment near campus, quietly gathering his wetsuit and board while his roommates slept. He'd grabbed a quick energy bar and coffee, checking the surf reports on his phone that showed promising conditions despite the marine layer. His girlfriend had texted him the night before, asking him to wait for her to join him, but Tyler was eager to catch the early session before his afternoon classes. But Tyler made a critical error in judgment that morning. Despite knowing that October was peak great white season along the California coast, and despite recent shark sightings reported by other surfers, he chose to paddle out alone. The nearby elephant seal rookery, just 300 yards south of his position, was in the middle of pupping season, a time when massive great whites patrolled the area like underwater sentinels, hunting for the protein-rich seals that represented their preferred prey. At 6:45 a.m., as the first pale light began to penetrate the marine layer, Tyler paddled through the murky water to his favorite spot 100 yards offshore. The poor visibility meant he could barely see 10 feet in any direction, but he knew the break well enough to navigate by feel and sound. He sat on his board in the lineup, waiting for the next set of waves, completely unaware that he was being observed from below by one of the ocean's most efficient predators. Great white sharks are ambush predators that rely heavily on the element of surprise, typically attacking from directly below at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Their attacks are so explosive that they can launch their entire 2-ton body completely out of the water. A 15-foot great white shark, drawn to the area by the nearby elephant seal colony, had been patrolling these waters since before dawn. To the shark's ancient sensory system, Tyler's silhouette against the dim morning light looked exactly like a young elephant seal, the perfect target for an investigative strike. The attack was swift and powerful. The great white struck from directly below with explosive force, its jaws clamping down on Tyler's leg in a single, crushing bite. The impact lifted Tyler partially out of the water before the shark immediately released him and retreated. Classic great white behavior when the predator realizes its target isn't a seal. Tyler managed one agonized scream that echoed across the foggy coastline as he found himself in the water with a severely damaged leg, his surfboard floating nearby in pieces. A jogger on the beach, barely visible through the marine layer, heard Tyler's cry and immediately called 911. Despite the poor visibility, Tyler's survival instincts kicked in. Using his remaining strength and his damaged surfboard as flotation, he began swimming toward shore, leaving a trail of blood that could have attracted the shark back. Fortunately, the great white had already departed the area, following typical post-attack behavior. Tyler's competitive swimming background proved crucial in those terrifying minutes as he fought to stay conscious and keep moving toward shore. He used techniques from his water safety training, controlling his breathing and conserving energy while applying pressure to his wounded leg. The cold water actually helped slow his blood loss, though hypothermia was becoming a serious concern. Coast Guard rescue swimmers reached Tyler within 15 minutes, finding him conscious but in severe shock from blood loss. The single bite had caused massive damage to his leg, severing major arteries and crushing bone. But quick medical response and Tyler's own determination kept him alive during the critical first hour. He was airlifted to a trauma center where surgeons worked for 8 hours to save his leg and his life. Tyler survived the attack, but required multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. He eventually returned to surfing, though never again alone, and always with increased respect for the ocean's apex predators. His experience highlighted the extreme danger of solo surfing during peak great white season. May 18th, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the waters off Islamorada in the Florida Keys. The sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, and the crystal-clear water offered visibility extending 60 feet in every direction. Ideal conditions for spearfishing in one of America's most productive fishing grounds. The gentle current and calm seas made it a perfect day for freediving, but beneath the surface, apex predators were already beginning to stir. Carlos Mendoza, 20 28, was living his dream as head chef at one of the Key's most exclusive restaurants, where his reputation for serving the freshest local fish had made him a rising star in the culinary world. Carlos was passionate about sourcing his own ingredients, spending his weekends spearfishing to provide unique catches for his restaurant's special menus. His friends described him as meticulous and safety-conscious, though he occasionally dove solo when his schedule didn't align with his regular diving partners. That morning, Carlos had loaded his boat with all his spearfishing gear, including his custom-made spear gun and emergency flotation device. He'd planned to meet his regular diving partner, but a last-minute family emergency had left Carlos diving alone. He'd considered postponing the trip, but the perfect conditions and his restaurant's need for fresh fish for the weekend menu convinced him to proceed solo. Carlos made a decision that would put him in extreme danger. He continued spearfishing alone after successfully catching several large fish, creating an extended blood trail in waters known to be patrolled by tiger sharks. At 2:15 p.m., Carlos had been diving for 3 hours in the productive waters 4 miles offshore. His success had been remarkable. 3 large fish hung from the stringer attached to his weight belt, including a sizable grouper and 2 snappers that would have been the pride of any spear fisherman. But with each successful catch, Carlos was unknowingly creating a blood trail that extended over 100 yards as he moved between dive spots. Tiger sharks are known as the wastebaskets of the sea because they will eat almost anything, from sea turtles and seals to license plates and tin cans. They possess incredibly powerful jaws, capable of crushing sea turtle shells, and are responsible for the second highest number of attacks on humans after great whites. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are less likely to release their prey after an initial bite, making encounters with them particularly dangerous for humans. Fatigue was beginning to set in from repeated deep dives to 40 feet, and Carlos was resting at the surface, floating on his back while catching his breath before his next dive. The blood from his catch continued to seep into the water around him, creating an olfactory beacon that could be detected by sharks from over a mile away. He was completely unaware that an 11-foot tiger shark had been following his scent trail for the past 15 minutes, closing in with the patient determination of a perfect predator. Carlos had just finished eating a quick snack and was preparing to make one final dive before heading back to shore when he noticed the water around him had become unusually still. Fish that had been abundant throughout the day had suddenly disappeared, and an eerie quiet had settled over the area, classic signs that a large predator was nearby, though Carlos didn't immediately recognize the warning signs. The attack came suddenly as Carlos prepared for another dive. The tiger shark struck from below, its powerful jaws clamping down on Carlos's leg and the fish stringer simultaneously. Unlike a great white's typical bite and release pattern, the tiger shark maintained its grip, thrashing violently as it tried to secure what it perceived as a large, struggling prey item. Carlos fought desperately, using his spear gun to strike the shark's head while trying to free himself from its jaws. The tiger shark's grip was powerful, but after nearly 30 seconds of struggle, it released Carlos and focused on the fish stringer, which it quickly consumed. Carlos, severely injured but conscious, managed to inflate his emergency flotation device and activate his distress beacon. His dive buddy, who had been fishing from their boat 300 yards away, heard the commotion and immediately started the engine, racing toward Carlos's location. He reached the scene within 2 minutes, finding Carlos conscious but bleeding heavily from deep lacerations to his leg and torso. The tiger shark had departed with its meal, following typical behavior after securing food. Emergency medical response was immediate, with Coast Guard helicopters airlifting Carlos to a trauma center within 45 minutes of the attack. He survived after multiple surgeries and months of recovery, though he never returned to solo spearfishing. July 9, 2017, dawned hot and humid at Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida. The previous night's thunderstorms had finally cleared, leaving behind calm seas but murky water conditions that should have raised red flags for the planned training exercise. The heavy rains had created freshwater runoff that turned the normally clear bay water brackish, exactly the environment that attracts one of the ocean's most aggressive and unpredictable predators. Petty Officer Sarah Kim, Abalone, 25, was the kind of Navy diver that instructors pointed to as an example of excellence. With 4 years of military diving experience and over 200 training dives logged without incident, Sarah was known for her calm professionalism and meticulous attention to safety protocols. Her fellow divers respected her expertise in underwater demolition, and she had recently been selected for advanced training that would have advanced her career significantly. That morning, Sarah had arrived early at the dive facility to conduct pre-dive equipment checks and review the training objectives with her team. She'd noticed the murky water conditions during her preliminary assessment, but trusted that the marine wildlife reconnaissance had been properly conducted. The training exercise was part of a critical certification program, and postponement would have meant weeks of rescheduling for the entire team. The Navy training exercise proceeded despite conditions that, in hindsight, should have triggered additional safety protocols. While marine wildlife reconnaissance was conducted, the recent storm conditions and brackish water created an environment that was particularly attractive to bull sharks, aggressive predators that had likely moved into the bay following the freshwater inflow, and abundant bait fish stirred up by the storms. At 10:30 a.m., during what should have been a routine underwater navigation exercise, Sarah found herself separated from her dive partner in 15 feet of murky water. The storm runoff had reduced visibility to less than 8 feet, making it challenging but not impossible to maintain visual contact with her teammate. Following standard protocol, Sarah surfaced to regroup and signal her position, but she found herself 100 yards from the training boat in water that had been transformed by the freshwater inflow. Sarah had been executing a complex underwater demolition simulation when the separation occurred. Her dive partner had been investigating a training target on the opposite side of a submerged structure when the current shifted, carrying Sarah further from their planned route. She'd attempted to signal underwater using standard hand signals, but the murky conditions made visual communication impossible beyond a few feet. Bull sharks are unique among shark species because they can tolerate both fresh and salt water, allowing them to venture far up rivers and into bays where other sharks cannot survive. They are responsible for more attacks on humans than any shark species except great whites, and their aggressive territorial nature makes them particularly dangerous in shallow, murky water. A 9-foot bull shark, drawn into the bay by the freshwater flow and the abundance of bait fish stirred up by the storm, had been patrolling the area since dawn. When Sarah surfaced, her movements and the electrical impulses from her equipment immediately attracted the predator's attention. Bull sharks are known for their aggressive investigative behavior, especially in brackish water, where they feel most comfortable. The attack was swift, but followed the typical bull shark pattern of a single powerful bite. The shark struck Sarah at the surface, its jaws clamping down on her torso before immediately releasing her. Investigative behavior similar to great whites, but with the bull shark's characteristic aggression. Sarah's emergency beacon activated automatically as she fought to stay conscious, her military training helping her remain calm despite the severe trauma. Sarah's years of military conditioning proved crucial in those first critical moments. Despite the shock and pain, she managed to maintain her position at the surface and control her breathing, preventing panic that could have worsened her situation. She used her emergency whistle to signal distress while applying pressure to her wounds with techniques learned in combat first aid training. Her dive partner surfaced 45 seconds later and immediately called for emergency extraction while applying direct pressure to Sarah's wounds. The support boat reached her location within 3 minutes, and the dive team's immediate first aid response was textbook perfect. Sarah remained conscious throughout the rescue, her military conditioning helping her survive the initial trauma and blood loss. Emergency medical response was rapid and professional. Sarah was airlifted to the Naval Hospital within 20 minutes, where trauma surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the damage from the bull shark's bite. She survived the attack, but required multiple surgeries and extensive rehabilitation. After 18 months of recovery, she returned to limited duty, eventually becoming an instructor in dive safety protocols. The incident led to immediate changes in Navy diving protocols, including enhanced marine life surveys before all training exercises in coastal waters and mandatory buddy system enforcement in low visibility conditions. Sarah's survival highlighted both the importance of proper emergency response and the unpredictable nature of bull shark encounters in brackish water. September 14, 2018 brought perfect conditions to the Neptune Islands off South Australia. Crystal clear water, calm seas, and the kind of visibility that made cage diving operators smile with anticipation. The Southern Ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, its deep blue surface hiding one of the world's most concentrated populations of great white sharks. For tourists seeking the ultimate adrenaline rush, there was no better place on Earth to come face to face with the ocean's apex predator. Jennifer Park, 31, was living out her bucket list dreams during a solo vacation to Australia. A successful marketing executive from Los Angeles, Jennifer had worked tirelessly for years to afford this once-in-a-lifetime trip, and cage diving with great whites represented the pinnacle of adventure tourism for her. She was a certified scuba diver with 30 logged dives, mostly in the tropical waters of the Caribbean and Hawaii, but she had never encountered anything more dangerous than a reef shark. Jennifer had spent the previous evening at the dive operator's briefing session, watching videos of previous cage diving expeditions and learning about great white behavior. She'd been fascinated by the footage of massive sharks gliding past the protective cages, their powerful forms moving with surprising grace through the water. The dive operator had emphasized safety protocols repeatedly, but Jennifer was focused more on the excitement than the warnings. The cage diving operation was professional and safety-focused, with multiple backup systems and experienced dive masters. Jennifer had undergone thorough safety briefings and was equipped with proper emergency signaling devices. The cage itself was a robust steel structure designed to keep tourists safe while allowing close observation of great whites with multiple exit points and constant surface support. At 11:45 a.m., during what had started as a routine cage diving session, the ocean around the Neptune Islands suddenly became a theater of primal power. A massive 16-foot great white shark, larger than any the crew had seen that season, approached the cage with the confident curiosity typical of dominant predators. The shark began displaying classic investigative behavior, circling the cage and occasionally bumping it with its snout, normal behavior that tourists paid thousands of dollars to witness. Great white sharks are naturally curious predators that investigate unfamiliar objects in their territory through physical contact, using their snouts and mouths to gather information about potential threats or prey. They have no hands to explore with, so they use their most sensitive organ, their mouth, to investigate. This behavior, while appearing aggressive to humans, is simply how great whites explore their environment and determine whether something poses a threat or opportunity. Their investigative nature has been documented countless times, with most encounters ending peacefully once the shark determines the object is neither food nor threat. Jennifer, initially thrilled by the close encounter, began to feel overwhelmed as the massive predator continued its investigation. The shark's size and proximity were far more intense than anything she had experienced in her previous diving adventures. When the great white made a particularly close pass, bumping the cage more forcefully than before, Jennifer made a critical error in judgment that would change everything. The shark's massive eye, black and emotionless, seemed to stare directly at Jennifer through the cage bars, creating a primal fear response that overrode her training. Her heart rate spiked, and she began hyperventilating through her regulator, a dangerous condition that could lead to panic and poor decision-making underwater. Instead of remaining calm and following the safety protocols that required staying inside the cage at all times, Jennifer panicked and attempted to signal for immediate surface evacuation. In her anxiety, she moved too quickly toward the top of the cage, inadvertently positioning herself near the cage opening just as the great white made another investigative pass. The dive master immediately recognized the dangerous situation and moved to guide Jennifer back to the center of the cage. The shark, responding to Jennifer's sudden movement and her position near the cage opening, made contact with her arm as she reached upward. The bite was investigative rather than predatory, a single, powerful clamp that immediately released when the shark determined she wasn't prey. However, the damage from even an investigative bite from a 16-foot great white was severe, the serrated teeth leaving deep lacerations that required immediate medical attention. The dive master inside the cage immediately activated emergency protocols, applying direct pressure to Jennifer's wounded arm while signaling for immediate surface evacuation. The great white, having completed its investigation and determining that the cage and its occupants posed no threat or food opportunity, departed the area following typical typical post-contact behavior. The entire incident lasted less than 30 seconds, but those moments would be etched in Jennifer's memory forever. Surface support crew had Jennifer out of the water within 90 seconds of the incident, their emergency response training proving invaluable in the critical first minutes. The boat's medical officer, specifically trained in shark bite trauma and equipped with advanced first aid supplies, immediately stabilized Jennifer's arm and controlled the bleeding while the captain radioed for emergency medical evacuation. Emergency medical response was immediate and professional. Jennifer was airlifted to Adelaide's trauma center, where surgeons worked to repair the damage to her arm and shoulder. The medical team's quick response and Jennifer's overall good health contributed significantly to her positive outcome. Jennifer survived the encounter, but required multiple reconstructive surgeries and months of physical therapy. She eventually regained most of the function in her arm, though she never returned to diving. Her experience led to enhanced safety protocols for cage diving operations, including mandatory panic management training and improved cage designs that minimized the possibility of tourist-shark contact. It was August 15, 2014, when the waters surrounding Seal Island, South Africa, claimed another victim to the ocean's most feared predator. Located 8 kilometers southeast of Hout Bay, this rocky outcrop churned with anticipation as dawn broke over the South African coast. The island's jagged cliffs rose 30 meters above the Atlantic, while beneath the surface, the continental shelf dropped into depths exceeding 500 meters. Home to over 60,000 Cape Fur seals, these waters served as a prime hunting ground for apex predators. Olivia Chen, a 34-year-old freelance wildlife photographer from San Francisco, had arrived at this remote location with a single purpose. For 12 years, she had built her reputation capturing dangerous wildlife in their natural habitats, often pushing boundaries that made fellow photographers uncomfortable. Her portfolio included close encounters with Kodiak bears in Alaska and saltwater crocodiles in Australia, but great whites remained her ultimate challenge. Chen had spent 2 years planning this expedition, studying shark behavior patterns and feeding schedules around Seal Island. Peak season brought massive females to these waters, some exceeding 20 feet in length. She had chosen to work alone, believing that smaller groups attracted less attention from the predators. Her diving cage bobbed 30 meters from the island's eastern shore, where the seal colony's morning exodus would soon begin. The great white shark represents the ocean's most efficient predator, having evolved over 400 million years into a perfect killing machine. Adult females can reach lengths of 20 feet and weight exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their triangular, serrated teeth are designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. These apex predators possess electroreception capabilities, detecting the electrical fields generated by all living creatures, making escape nearly impossible once targeted. At 7:23 a.m., an 18-foot female great white emerged from the depths, her massive form cutting through the water with terrifying grace. The shark began circling Chen's cage in a methodical pattern, her black eyes fixed on the photographer inside. Chen recognized the aggressive posturing immediately. The arched back, lowered pectoral fins, and tight circling behavior indicated a highly agitated predator. Despite the obvious danger signals and every safety protocol screaming against it, Chen's obsession consumed her rational mind. The morning light filtered perfectly through the water, and the shark's massive size promised the career-defining footage she'd been desperately chasing. Her trembling hand moved toward the cage's emergency latch, a mechanism she'd been trained never to touch, except in life-threatening equipment failures. Just 30 seconds, she told herself, the same lie that had driven her to photograph avalanches and deadly storms. The metal door swung open with a soft click that seemed to echo through the water like a death knell. Chen extended her waterproof camera housing beyond the cage's protective bars, focusing on the approaching predator. The great white detected the movement instantly, her lateral line system registering the subtle water displacement. In a burst of explosive power, the shark accelerated directly toward the opening. The attack occurred with devastating precision. The great white's jaws, capable of exerting 4,000 psi, clamped down on Chen's torso just below her ribcage. The initial impact crushed her sternum and multiple ribs. the bone fragments puncturing both lungs simultaneously. The predator's powerful neck muscles engaged in a violent thrashing motion, designed to tear away large chunks of flesh from prey. Chen's body was pulled completely from the cage as the shark's serrated teeth sawed through muscle tissue and organs. Her wetsuit provided no protection against the razor-sharp dental array, which sliced through the neoprene-like paper. Blood erupted into the surrounding water as major arteries were severed. The shark's teeth had penetrated her liver, stomach, and left kidney, causing massive internal hemorrhaging. Chen's breathing apparatus was torn away during the initial attack, filling her damaged lungs with seawater. The combination of catastrophic blood loss, organ failure, and drowning proved fatal within 90 seconds of the initial bite. The great white released its grip and disappeared into the depths, leaving Chen's lifeless body floating near the surface. The cage operator, monitoring from the support vessel, immediately initiated emergency protocols and contacted maritime rescue services. South African authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, focusing on safety protocol violations and equipment modifications. The diving company faced intense scrutiny regarding its cage maintenance and emergency procedures. Chen's family released a brief statement acknowledging her passion for wildlife photography, while requesting privacy during their grief. The attack marked the third fatal great white encounter near Seal Island in 18 months, prompting renewed calls for enhanced safety regulations in the cage diving industry. Local authorities temporarily suspended commercial shark diving operations pending the investigation's completion. It was June 3, 2015, when the crystal-clear waters of Beka Lagoon in Fiji transformed from paradise into a nightmare. Located on the southern coast of Viti Levu, this pristine marine sanctuary stretched across 390 square kilometers of protected coral reefs and deep channels. The lagoon's unique geography, featuring dramatic drop-offs and tidal passages, had created the perfect ecosystem for apex predators to flourish in unprecedented numbers. Ethan Reynolds, a 28-year-old marine biology teacher from Perth, had chosen this remote destination to celebrate his honeymoon with wife Sarah, a certified rescue diver with over 200 logged dives. While Ethan possessed extensive diving experience, he had never attempted cage diving with sharks. His adventurous and curious personality drove him to seek first-hand encounters with the marine life he taught about in his classroom. The couple had specifically requested the most active shark site in the lagoon, despite repeated warnings from local operators about recent aggressive encounters. Ethan's fascination with predator behavior stemmed from his academic work studying shark migration patterns. He viewed this honeymoon dive as an opportunity to gather behavioral observations for his curriculum development. Sarah, equally passionate about marine conservation, supported her husband's research ambitions. The couple had spent months planning this expedition, researching the lagoon's reputation as one of the world's premier bull shark diving locations. Recent heavy rainfall had increased nutrient runoff into the lagoon, attracting larger numbers of prey fish and subsequently drawing more predators to the area. Local dive operators had reported unusual territorial behavior among resident bull sharks, with several incidents of cage contact in the preceding weeks. The water temperature of 82 degrees Fahrenheit created optimal conditions for shark activity. Bull sharks represent one of the ocean's most formidable and unpredictable predators. These apex hunters can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with their stocky, muscular build generating tremendous power through the water. Their unique physiology allows them to survive in both saltwater and freshwater environments, making them one of the few shark species capable of traveling far inland through river systems. Most critically, bull sharks possess the highest testosterone levels of any animal on Earth, fueling their notoriously aggressive temperament. Their bite force measures over 5,900 pounds per square inch, delivered through rows of broad, triangular teeth designed to grip and crush rather than slice. Unlike great whites that typically bite and release, bull sharks employ a death roll technique to disorient prey and tear away chunks of flesh. At 2:30 p.m., Ethan and Sarah descended into the aluminum cage suspended 20 feet below the surface. The rectangular enclosure measured 8 feet by 6 feet, with horizontal bars spaced 10 inches apart to prevent shark entry, while allowing clear viewing. The cage's design had been tested extensively, but recent incidents suggested some predators had learned to exploit structural weaknesses. Within minutes of reaching depth, a massive 10-foot male bull shark emerged from the murky depths. His scarred hide and distinctive blunt snout marked him as a mature, territorial male. The predator approached the cage with calculated precision, his small eyes fixed on the human occupants with predatory interest. Ethan, mesmerized by the shark's proximity and eager to observe its behavior patterns, made a fatal decision. Despite explicit safety warnings, he extended his right hand through the cage bars, attempting to touch the passing predator. The bull shark's response was instantaneous and devastating. The predator's massive jaws clamped down on Ethan's forearm with crushing force. His triangular teeth, each measuring over an inch in length, penetrated through the neoprene wetsuit and deep into the bone. The radius and ulna fractured under immense pressure as serrated edges severed muscle tissue, tendons, and major blood vessels. The bull shark immediately initiated his signature death roll, a feeding behavior designed to disorient prey and strip flesh from bone. Ethan's shoulder joint dislocated with an audible crack as the 400-pound predator twisted his powerful body in violent spirals. Sarah grabbed her husband's free arm, desperately attempting to pull him back into the cage's safety. The aluminum bars began bending under the tremendous torque as the shark thrashed against the enclosure. Ethan's wetsuit filled with crimson as the brachial artery ruptured, sending pressurized streams of blood through the water. The predator's grip tightened with each rotation, his teeth grinding against bone as he worked to separate the limb. For 45 seconds, the bull shark maintained his death grip while performing continuous barrel rolls. The violent motion stripped the flesh from Ethan's forearm in ragged chunks, exposing white bone beneath. His hand, still trapped in the predator's jaws, had turned completely pale as circulation ceased. Bone fragments and tissue floated through the water column as the shark's teeth functioned like a biological saw. The bull shark finally released its grip and disappeared into the depths, leaving behind a cloud of blood and debris. Ethan's right arm hung by mere strands of muscle and tendon below the elbow, the bone completely severed. Emergency ascent procedures began immediately as Sarah applied direct pressure to the catastrophic wound using her weight belt. Surface medical teams worked frantically during the helicopter evacuation to Suva Private Hospital. Surgeons performed emergency amputation below the elbow, removing the mangled remains of Ethan's forearm. Multiple blood transfusions were required to replace the massive volume lost during the 45-second attack. Fijian maritime authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into cage design standards and safety protocols. The incident prompted new regulations requiring reinforced barriers and mandatory safety briefings about maintaining distance from marine predators. Beka Lagoon Shark Dive suspended operations for 6 weeks, pending safety upgrades. Ethan's recovery required 18 months of reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation. His teaching career continued with a prosthetic limb, though he never returned to cage diving. It was September 22, 2016, when the crystal-clear waters surrounding Cat Island, Bahamas, shimmered under the morning Caribbean sun, their deceptive beauty masking the apex predators lurking beneath. This remote stretch of the Bahamas had earned a notorious reputation among thrill-seekers for its aggressive oceanic white-tip shark population, drawing adrenaline junkies from around the world to test their courage against nature's most efficient killers. Sophia Rossi, a 31-year-old extreme sports instructor from California, had specifically chosen this location for her friend's bachelorette party adventure. Known throughout her professional skydiving and rock climbing circles for pushing safety limits beyond reason, Sophia possessed an insatiable appetite for danger that had already resulted in numerous close calls with wildlife during her global adventures. Her 3 college friends watched nervously as she boasted about her plans to get closer to the sharks than anyone had dared before. The previous evening's heavy drinking session had left Sophia still intoxicated as their charter boat anchored above the notorious feeding grounds. Despite the captain's repeated safety warnings and her friends' growing concerns, Sophia dismissed all precautions with her characteristic reckless confidence. The shark cage diving operation had attracted multiple oceanic whitetips to the area, their distinctive white-tipped fins cutting through the water with predatory precision. Oceanic white-tip sharks rank among the ocean's most aggressive and opportunistic predators. These massive creatures, capable of reaching lengths exceeding 12 feet, possess incredibly powerful jaws, lined with razor-sharp, serrated teeth, designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Unlike their more cautious reef-dwelling cousins, oceanic whitetips display bold, investigative behavior toward unfamiliar objects, often approaching potential prey with little hesitation. During the morning dive session, several oceanic whitetips circled the submerged cage, while Sophia and her friends observed from within the protective barriers. Unsatisfied with the conventional viewing experience, Sophia ignored all safety protocols and climbed onto the cage's slippery roof, declaring her intention to surf with the sharks. Her friends screamed warnings from below as she balanced precariously on the wet metal surface, arms outstretched for balance. A massive 12-foot female oceanic whitetip, attracted by the unusual movement above, approached from the depths with calculated precision. The shark's powerful tail propelled its muscular body upward as Sophia lost her footing on the treacherous cage top. She plunged directly into the water beside the ascending predator, her splash creating the exact disturbance that triggered the shark's attack response. The oceanic whitetip struck with lightning speed, its massive jaws engulfing Sophia's entire midsection in a crushing bite. The shark's teeth, each measuring over an inch in length, penetrated deep into her torso, while the incredible bite force of over 4,000 pounds per square inch instantly crushed her pelvis and lower spine. Vertebrae shattered like glass under immense pressure as the shark's jaws compressed her body cavity. The predator lifted Sophia completely out of the water, her legs dangling helplessly as blood poured from the massive wounds. The shark's powerful neck muscles shook her violently from side to side, the serrated teeth sawing through muscle, organs, and bone with horrifying efficiency. Her aorta and vena cava severed completely, causing catastrophic internal bleeding that turned the surrounding water crimson. The oceanic whitetip dove deep, dragging Sophia's broken body 40 feet below the surface. The combination of massive blood loss, crushed internal organs, and drowning proved instantly fatal as seawater flooded her punctured lungs. The shark continued its violent thrashing for several more seconds before releasing her lifeless form, which sank slowly toward the ocean floor as the predator circled nearby. Bahamian authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident, though the remote location and lack of proper safety oversight complicated their efforts. Sophia's family released a brief statement requesting privacy while expressing their devastation over losing someone who lived a life without limits. The charter company faced intense scrutiny over its safety protocols and supervision of intoxicated clients. The tragedy prompted new regulations requiring mandatory sobriety checks for all cage diving participants. It was April 18, 2017. The crystal-clear waters of Tiger Beach stretched endlessly under the Caribbean sun, 25 miles off the western coast of Grand Bahama Island. This remote diving location had earned its reputation as one of the world's premier shark diving destinations, where the sandy bottom dropped to 40 feet and massive predators congregated during the cooler months. The area's unique geography created perfect hunting conditions, with shallow reefs providing abundant prey and warm currents carrying the scent of food across miles of ocean. Dr. Liam Gallagher descended into these waters with the confidence of a man who had spent 15 years studying apex predators. The 42-year-old marine biologist from Sydney University had published dozens of papers on shark behavior and feeding patterns, establishing himself as one of Australia's leading experts on large marine predators. His methodical approach to research had taken him to dangerous waters across the globe, but Tiger Beach represented the pinnacle of his career ambitions. The site's high concentration of tiger sharks during winter months offered unprecedented opportunities to collect behavioral data and tissue samples that could revolutionize the understanding of predator ecology. Gallagher had chosen this particular expedition to test new sampling equipment designed to collect genetic material without traditional baiting methods. His specialized 6-foot carbon fiber pole featured a spring-loaded collection device that could extract tissue samples through minimal contact. The research vessel anchored above had lowered a reinforced aluminum cage to the seafloor, providing what should have been complete protection, while allowing close observation of the massive predators that ruled these waters. Tiger sharks rank among the ocean's most formidable predators, reaching lengths of 18 feet and weights exceeding 2,000 pounds. These apex hunters possess serrated teeth designed to slice through turtle shells, whale blubber, and virtually any organic material they encounter. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces exceeding 6,000 pounds per square inch, while their muscular bodies can accelerate from stillness to 25 miles per hour in seconds. Unlike many shark species, tigers show little fear of humans and possess an aggressive curiosity that makes them particularly dangerous to researchers. The 14-foot female that approached Gallagher's cage represented a perfect specimen for his research. Her scarred hide and massive girth indicated an experienced predator in her prime, exactly the type of individual whose genetic material could provide crucial insights into tiger shark population dynamics. As she circled the cage with lazy confidence, Gallagher prepared his sampling equipment and extended the pole through the cage bars. The moment the carbon fiber rod made contact with the shark's flank, her demeanor changed instantly. The gentle circling motion exploded into violent aggression as she detected the foreign object against her skin. Her massive tail drove her forward with tremendous force, her mouth opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth as she attacked the perceived threat. The pole became her target, but her momentum carried her directly into the cage structure. The impact bent the reinforced aluminum bars inward with a grinding screech of twisted metal. Gallagher's left leg, positioned near the cage wall, became trapped between the bent bars as they compressed around his shin just below the knee. The wetsuit provided no protection as the metal edges cut into his flesh, but worse was yet to come. The tiger shark's attack continued as her jaws clamped down on his trapped leg. Her serrated teeth penetrated through the neoprene wetsuit and into the soft tissue beneath, while the crushing force of her bite fractured both the tibia and fibula bones. Blood clouded the water as her teeth ground against bone, the shark's natural thrashing motion causing additional tissue damage with each movement. Gallagher reached for his diving knife with desperate precision, striking repeatedly at the shark's snout and eye area. Each blow was calculated to target the most sensitive areas, without causing permanent damage to the research specimen. After what seemed like an eternity, but lasted only seconds, the shark released her grip and disappeared into the blue water beyond. The twisted cage bars held Gallagher's mangled leg in a vice-like grip as blood continued to flow from multiple puncture wounds. The dive crew above worked frantically with cutting tools to free him from the compressed metal, while emergency medical protocols were activated aboard the research vessel. The tissue damage was extensive, with the shark's teeth having crushed muscle, severed blood vessels, and created compound fractures in both lower leg bones. Following emergency evacuation to Nassau and subsequent medical treatment in Miami, doctors determined that the extensive bone fragmentation and tissue destruction required amputation below the knee. The Bahamas Maritime Authority launched an investigation into the incident, focusing on safety protocols for scientific diving operations in shark-populated waters. Gallagher's University issued statements supporting improved safety measures for marine research, while the international scientific community debated the risks inherent in close-contact predator studies. The incident sparked renewed discussions about the balance between scientific advancement and researcher safety in extreme environments. Marine biology programs worldwide reviewed their protocols for working with large predators, implementing stricter guidelines for cage diving operations. It was November 8, 2017 in Mexico. The waters surrounding Guadalupe Island churned with an otherworldly darkness as dawn broke over the Pacific. Located 150 miles off the Baja California coast, this remote volcanic island had become a mecca for great white shark encounters during peak season. The water temperature hovered at a perfect 68 degrees, creating ideal conditions for the apex predators that migrated here annually. Kelp forests swayed in the underwater currents, while sea lions barked from rocky outcroppings, their presence attracting the very predators that made these waters legendary. Chloe Kim, a 39-year-old documentary filmmaker from London, stood on the deck of the research vessel Neptune's Eye, adjusting her diving equipment with practiced precision. Her weathered hands betrayed years of dangerous wildlife filming across 6 continents. Kim had built her reputation capturing footage that others deemed impossible, often placing herself in precarious situations for the perfect shot. Her previous documentary about polar bears had earned critical acclaim, but her latest project about African lions had flopped commercially, leaving investors demanding more sensational content. The financial pressure weighed heavily on her shoulders as she prepared for what she hoped would be her career-defining moment. The pressure to deliver had brought Kim to these shark-infested waters during the height of the great white season. Her 3-person crew watched nervously as she outlined her plan to film outside the protective cage. The dive operator, Captain Rodriguez, had initially refused her request, but Kim's persistence and additional payment had eventually swayed him. She needed footage that would guarantee her documentary's success, and she believed authentic close-range shots of great whites would provide exactly that dramatic impact. The morning briefing had been tense, with crew members expressing concerns about the unprecedented risk. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of reaching lengths exceeding 20 feet and weights of over 5,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies can propel them through water at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. Most critically, their jaws contain up to 300 triangular serrated teeth, arranged in multiple rows, designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. These apex predators typically hunt seals and sea lions around Guadalupe Island, using ambush tactics that involve striking from below with tremendous force. Their bite force can exceed 4,000 psi, capable of crushing a small boat. At 10:47 a.m., Kim descended into the crystal-clear water, her handheld camera housing gleaming in the filtered sunlight. The diving cage floated nearby, her crew filming from its safety. Within minutes, a massive female great white, measuring approximately 19 feet in length, emerged from the blue depths. The shark moved with deliberate grace, circling Kim at a distance of roughly 30 feet. Its black eyes remained fixed on the filmmaker as she maneuvered to capture the perfect angle. The predator's scarred hide told stories of countless battles in these unforgiving waters. Kim positioned herself 10 feet from the cage, completely exposed to open water. The great white's circling pattern tightened with each pass, its massive pectoral fins cutting through the water with mechanical precision. Without any warning signs, the shark suddenly accelerated from below, its powerful tail driving it upward at incredible speed. The impact was catastrophic. The great white jaws clamped down on Kim's torso just below her ribcage, the upper teeth penetrating deep into her back while the lower teeth crushed her abdomen. The force of the strike launched both predator and victim above the water's surface before gravity pulled them back down. Kim's camera spiraled away into the depths as the shark's teeth punctured her liver, stomach, and several major blood vessels. The great white began its death roll, rotating its massive body with Kim still trapped in its jaws. The first rotation shattered 3 ribs on her left side. The second roll tore through her wetsuit and opened massive lacerations across her torso. The third and final rotation caused complete organ failure as the shark's serrated teeth severed her spinal cord and punctured her lungs. Blood poured from Kim's wounds, turning the surrounding water crimson. Her wetsuit filled completely with blood as the shark maintained its grip for nearly 2 minutes. The predator's powerful jaw muscles continued to compress, causing additional internal damage with each passing second. Finally, the great white released its grip, allowing Kim's lifeless body to float motionless in the bloodied water. The dive team recovered Kim's body within minutes, but the massive blood loss and catastrophic organ damage had already proven fatal. Her torso bore the unmistakable pattern of great white teeth marks, with wounds measuring over 18 inches across. Mexican authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident, focusing on the dive operator's decision to allow cage-free diving during peak shark season. Kim's family released a brief statement expressing their grief while acknowledging her lifelong passion for wildlife filmmaking. The footage from her final dive was never released to the public. Environmental groups used the tragedy to highlight the dangers of exploiting wildlife for entertainment purposes. The waters around Guadalupe Island continue to attract thrill seekers and researchers, but Kim's death serves as a stark reminder of the ocean's unforgiving nature. Her story joins a growing list of encounters where human ambition met nature's raw power with devastating consequences. April 15th, 2014, brought perfect fishing conditions to the waters off Montauk Point, New York. The Atlantic stretched endlessly under clear skies, with gentle swells that promised an excellent day on the water. Captain Valentina Val Kowalski, 45, prepared her charter boat for what would become her final voyage. Valentina was an experienced charter captain with 18 years running fishing trips in these waters. As one of the few female charter captains on the East Coast, she had built a solid reputation and was known for never backing down from challenging conditions. That afternoon, she was running a bluefin tuna charter with 6 clients, all eager to land the fish of a lifetime. The group had been chumming heavily for over 90 minutes in 35 feet of water, creating a concentrated blood slick as they successfully landed several bloody tuna. The strategy was working perfectly. The scent of fresh blood was drawing fish from miles around. At 3:45 p.m., their anchor became tangled in kelp, threatening to cost them their expensive setup. Rather than cut the line and lose hundreds of dollars in equipment, Valentina made the decision to dive down and free the anchor herself. The waters off Montauk Point were known for their rich marine life, but also for their predators. The area's position at the convergence of several ocean currents created a natural feeding ground that attracted everything from small baitfish to massive bluefin tuna. What many recreational fishermen didn't realize was that this same convergence also made it a prime hunting ground for great whites, particularly during the warmer months when seal populations were at their peak. Valentina's clients watched nervously as she prepared her diving gear. Several of them had expressed concern about her entering the water, especially given the amount of blood and fish parts that had been dispersed around their boat. The chum slick extended nearly a quarter mile behind them, creating a visible trail on the surface that could be seen from the air. The decision to dive was not made lightly. Valentina had calculated the risks and believed that her years of experience and the relatively shallow depth would keep her safe. She had made similar dives dozens of times before, always successfully retrieving tangled equipment without incident. Her first mate had offered to make the dive instead, but Valentina insisted that as captain, it was her responsibility to handle the dangerous tasks. What Valentina didn't realize was that great white sharks possess one of the most sophisticated sensory systems in the animal kingdom. They can detect a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water from over a mile away, and their lateral line system allows them to sense electrical impulses from remarkable distances. The concentrated chum slick had been like ringing a dinner bell for predators in the area, creating an irresistible beacon that could be detected from vast distances. As Valentina descended toward the 30-foot anchor line, working methodically to free the expensive equipment, she was completely unaware that a 16-foot female great white had been following the boat's chum trail for the past hour. The massive predator, weighing over 2,000 pounds, had been drawn by the irresistible scent of fresh tuna blood that had been streaming from their boat. The attack came from below, as they always do. The shark struck with explosive force, her powerful jaws clamping down on Valentina's right thigh. The initial bite severed major arteries instantly, sending clouds of crimson into the water. Valentina's scream cut through the afternoon air as she desperately tried to surface. But the shark wasn't finished. Attracted by the fresh blood, the predator attacked again, this time grabbing her left leg with crushing force. Her first mate immediately threw life rings while frantically radioing for help, and her clients worked desperately to pull her toward the boat. The water around them turned red as Valentina fought for her life. Despite reaching her within 3 minutes, Valentina had lost massive amounts of blood from the devastating leg wounds. The femoral arteries in both legs had been severed, and despite the crew's frantic efforts to apply pressure to the wounds, she was losing blood faster than they could control it. She died from hemorrhagic shock 8 minutes later, her life ebbing away even as the Coast Guard helicopter appeared on the horizon. The attack had occurred during optimal hunting conditions, afternoon feeding time in bloodied water with perfect visibility for a predator that had evolved to kill with surgical precision. The investigation later revealed that the concentrated chum slick had created the perfect storm of circumstances that drew the predator directly to their location. But while the waters off Montauk claimed one life through a moment of poor judgment, July 3, 2015, brought optimal conditions to the Neptune Islands off South Australia. The Southern Ocean was crystal clear with visibility extending over 100 feet into the depths. Perfect for underwater photography. Dr. Serafina Blackwood, 31, was a professional underwater photographer and marine biologist who had been working at Neptune Islands for 3 weeks on a sanctioned research project documenting great white behavior. Serafina had been diving with great whites for years, always from the safety of protective cages, always following protocol to the letter. Her work was destined for publication, and she had been capturing extraordinary footage of these apex predators in their natural habitat. The Neptune Islands were considered one of the premier locations in the world for great white research. The remote archipelago, located 35 miles south of Port Lincoln, served as a natural aggregation site for great whites hunting the abundant fur seal colonies. The crystal-clear waters and predictable shark behavior made it an ideal location for scientific study, but also one of the most dangerous places on Earth to encounter these predators outside of protective barriers. Serafina's research project was groundbreaking in its scope. She was documenting feeding behaviors, social interactions, and territorial patterns that had never been captured on film before. Her underwater photography skills were legendary in the marine biology community, and her images had already contributed to several major scientific publications. The equipment she used was state-of-the-art, worth more than most people's cars, and absolutely essential to her career. The research station at Neptune Islands operated under strict safety protocols developed over decades of shark research. Every dive was carefully planned, with multiple safety divers, emergency equipment, and constant communication with the surface. That morning, several large great whites had been circling the research area, drawn by the carefully controlled bait that researchers use to attract them for study. The sharks were displaying typical investigative behavior, approaching the cages with curiosity rather than aggression. It was exactly the kind of behavior Serafina needed to document, and she had been getting some of the best footage of her career. At 5:45 a.m., during optimal morning light conditions, Serafina was completing her final shots from inside the protective cage when disaster struck in the form of equipment failure. Her camera's power cable became severely tangled in the cage door's hinge mechanism as she maneuvered for the perfect shot. As she tried to free the cable, it only pulled tighter, preventing the cage door from closing properly. Her safety diver was inside the boat reviewing footage when Serafina made the fateful decision that would cost her life. Rather than signal for help and risk losing the camera system, she decided to quickly surface and untangle the cable herself. It seemed like a simple solution. She was an expert swimmer, the surface was only 15 feet away, and she would be back in the cage within seconds. What Serafina didn't account for was the behavior of the 15-foot male great white that had been circling the cage for several minutes. Great whites are naturally curious creatures, and cage diving operations often heighten their investigative behavior. When they see cage activity, they frequently enter what marine biologists call investigation mode, a heightened state of alertness where they're more likely to approach and test potential items with their mouths. This behavior makes them particularly dangerous to anyone outside the protective barriers. She surfaced 15 yards from the cage boat, struggling with the tangled cable just as the massive predator was approaching to investigate. The shark, already in an investigative state due to the cage activity, immediately identified her as something worth examining more closely. In the predator's mind, anything moving at the surface during feeding time was potential prey that needed to be tested. The attack was swift and devastating. The great white's powerful jaws, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, clamped down on Serafina's torso in its initial strike. Her safety diver heard her screams echoing across the water and dove in immediately, but the damage was already catastrophic. The shark had grabbed her chest and abdomen, its serrated teeth designed by millions of years of evolution to tear through flesh and bone with surgical precision. The boat crew threw flotation devices and initiated emergency procedures, reaching Serafina within 90 seconds. The expedition's marine medic immediately began first aid, working frantically to control the massive bleeding from her torso. However, she had sustained massive chest and abdominal injuries from the shark's powerful bite, with internal organs damaged beyond repair. Despite their best efforts and immediate medical attention, Serafina died from trauma and blood loss during the helicopter evacuation to Adelaide, 35 minutes after the attack. The investigation revealed that equipment failure had created the perfect storm of circumstances. An experienced professional forced to make a split-second decision that placed her in harm's way at the worst possible moment. September 22, 2016, dawned with unusual clarity off Pacifica, California. The Pacific Ocean sparkled under brilliant sunshine, with offshore winds creating the kind of glassy conditions that made the Northern California coast famous among surfers and fishermen alike. Lieutenant Ezekiel "Zeke" Hawthorne, 29, was enjoying a rare day off from his demanding duties as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. Ezekiel was an elite Coast Guard rescue swimmer with 7 years of service, credited with saving 23 lives in some of the most dangerous conditions imaginable. He was on personal leave, fishing with 2 close friends 8 miles offshore, enjoying the rare luxury of being on the water without the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The waters off Pacifica were known for their unpredictable conditions and abundant marine life. The area around Mavericks, famous for its massive winter swells, was also notorious for its great white shark population. Local surfers and fishermen had learned to respect these waters, understanding that the same conditions that created world-class waves also attracted some of the ocean's most dangerous predators. Ezekiel's friends had chosen this particular spot because it was far enough offshore to avoid the crowds, but close enough to shore to provide safety if conditions deteriorated. The weather forecast had been perfect, and they had launched early to take advantage of the calm sea. The rescue swimmer training that had made Ezekiel legendary in the Coast Guard was both a blessing and a curse. He had been conditioned to respond instantly to emergencies, to put the lives of others before his own safety, and to never hesitate when someone needed help. These instincts had saved dozens of lives over his career, but they also meant he could never truly turn off his sense of responsibility, even on his days off. His friends knew about his heroic reputation, and often joked that he couldn't help himself when it came to helping others. They had seen him stop to help stranded motorists, assist elderly people with their groceries, and volunteer for every dangerous mission that came up at his Coast Guard station. It was simply who he was, someone who couldn't ignore another person's distress. At 2:15 p.m., their peaceful afternoon was shattered when they spotted a capsized kayaker clinging desperately to his overturned boat about 200 yards away. The man was clearly exhausted, his arms barely able to maintain their grip on the slippery hull. Ezekiel's training kicked in immediately. He could see the victim was in serious trouble and wouldn't last much longer in the cold Pacific water. His friends immediately reached for the radio to call the Coast Guard for official backup, but Ezekiel was already assessing the situation. The kayaker was clearly hypothermic and losing strength rapidly. Without hesitation, Ezekiel dove from their 22-foot boat and began swimming toward the victim, despite his friends' protests to wait for Coast Guard backup. It was exactly the kind of split-second decision that had made him a legend in the Coast Guard. What none of them knew was that the area around Mavericks had experienced increased seal activity due to a massive bait ball that had formed after recent storms. The murky, post-storm waters were perfect hunting conditions for great whites, and several had been spotted in the area over the past few days. Great whites are ambush predators that rely on explosive surprise attacks. They typically hunt from below, using their powerful tails to launch themselves upward at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. As Ezekiel reached the exhausted kayaker and began towing him back toward the rescue boat, a 17-foot female great white, hunting in the murky waters, detected the electrical signatures of their beating hearts and the vibrations of their movement. To the predator, the splashing and struggling looked exactly like wounded seals, her preferred prey during this time of year. The attack came from directly below, with the explosive force that had made great whites the ocean's most feared predator. The massive shark grabbed Ezekiel's legs, likely mistaking the two men's frantic movement for wounded marine mammals. Even as the predator's jaws clamped down on his lower body, Ezekiel's heroic instincts never wavered. With his last conscious act, he managed to push the kayaker toward the rescue boat before the shark attacked again, this time fatally. His friends reached both men within 4 minutes, successfully saving the kayaker, but finding Ezekiel had sustained massive trauma to his legs and lower torso. The great white's serrated teeth had severed major arteries, and despite immediate first aid and pressure bandages, he was losing blood at an alarming rate. He died from blood loss and shock during the helicopter evacuation, just 15 minutes after the attack. November 8, 2017, brought crisp, clear conditions to the Mendocino coast of Northern California. The Pacific stretched endlessly under overcast skies, with gentle swells rolling in from the northwest. Perfect conditions for what would be the final Abalone diving day of the season. Bartholomew Bart Sinclair, 52, stood on the rocky shore, breathing in the salt air and feeling the familiar excitement that came with hunting for the ocean's most prized shellfish. Bartholomew was an experienced recreational abalone diver with 15 years of freediving experience in these waters. His weathered wetsuit and well-worn diving gear told the story of countless successful hunts. For over a decade, he had been making the pilgrimage to these remote coves, freediving to depths of 25 feet in search of the red abalone that had become increasingly rare along the California coast. The Mendocino coast was legendary among abalone divers for its pristine waters and abundant shellfish populations. The area's remoteness meant that it was less heavily harvested than more accessible locations, making it a favorite destination for serious divers willing to make the trek to these isolated coves. Bartholomew had been diving this particular stretch of coast for over a decade, learning its secrets through years of patient exploration. He knew which tides provided the best conditions, which coves offered the largest specimens, and which areas were most likely to be productive during different times of the year. The abalone season was strictly regulated, with specific dates, size limits, and bag limits designed to protect the declining populations. This would be one of the last legal diving days of the year, and Bartholomew had been planning this trip for weeks. His regular diving partner was recovering from surgery, but Bartholomew couldn't resist making one final dive of the season alone. What Bartholomew didn't know was that 2 days earlier, a single dead seal had washed ashore just a quarter-mile from his chosen diving spot. Local marine officials had attributed the death to natural causes, filing it away as routine marine mortality without conducting a thorough examination. But the seal hadn't died of natural causes. It had been killed by a great white shark, and its death was a warning sign that went unrecognized by authorities. At 11:30 a.m., Bartholomew entered the crystal-clear water at the remote cove, his float bag trailing behind him as he began his methodical search. The visibility was excellent, extending nearly 30 feet in all directions, and he could see the rocky bottom clearly. The conditions were perfect for what he hoped would be a productive final dive of the season. He made several successful dives to 25 feet, prying red abalone from their rocky homes and placing them carefully in his collection bag. The shellfish were plentiful, and he was having one of his best days in recent memory. Each dive required him to hold his breath for nearly 2 minutes as he worked to remove the abalone without damaging their shells. Great whites are known to patrol the same hunting grounds repeatedly, especially areas where they've had recent success. These apex predators have excellent spatial memory and will return to productive hunting spots day after day, drawn by the scent markers and familiar territory that promise easy prey. When a great white kills in a particular area, it often continues to hunt there for several days, establishing a temporary territory around the kill site. The kelp forests that surrounded the cove provided perfect cover for a hunting great white. The dense underwater vegetation created a maze of shadows and hiding places where a large predator could approach unseen. The same kelp that made the area attractive to abalone also made it an ideal hunting ground for sharks, providing concealment and ambush opportunities. On his 6th dive, while prying a particularly large abalone from the rocks at 25 feet, Bartholomew was completely focused on his task. The shellfish was wedged tightly into a crevice, requiring all his attention and strength to remove without damaging it. He was so concentrated on his work that he didn't notice the massive shadow approaching from the kelp forest behind him. The 16-foot male great white had been feeding in the area since killing the seal 2 days earlier, and was attracted by Bartholomew's splashing and the scent from his catch bag. The combination of movement, electrical impulses from his beating heart, and the smell of disturbed marine life created an irresistible target for the predator. As Bartholomew surfaced for air, his lungs burning from the extended dive, the shark struck with the lightning speed that had made its species the ocean's most efficient predator. His scream echoed across the empty cove as he desperately tried to fight off the massive predator, but he was alone with no one to hear his cries for help. The shark attacked twice more as Bartholomew tried frantically to reach shore, each strike drawing more blood into the water and triggering the predator's feeding response. The remote location that had made this cove perfect for abalone diving now became a death trap. His dive buddy, who was supposed to pick him up later that afternoon, arrived 15 minutes early and heard Bartholomew's desperate cries from the parking area above the cove. By the time he scrambled down the rocky path to the water's edge, Bartholomew had lost consciousness from massive blood loss, floating face down in the crimson-stained water. Despite immediate CPR and a helicopter evacuation, Bartholomew died during transport to Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital, becoming the first abalone diving fatality in that area in over a decade. June 12, 2018, dawned with spectacular conditions at Muizenberg Beach, South Africa. The Indian Ocean sparkled under a brilliant sunrise, with gentle offshore breezes creating the kind of perfect swimming conditions that had made this stretch of coastline famous among triathletes worldwide. Cordelia Cora Nightingale, 27, stood on the pristine white sand, adjusting her goggles and feeling the familiar pre-training excitement that had driven her athletic pursuits for years. Cordelia was a dedicated amateur triathlete, training for her first Ironman competition. She had traveled from London to Cape Town, specifically to train in these legendary waters, having spent weeks planning this trip and researching ocean conditions, currents, and safety protocols for the famous Muizenberg Beach. Muizenberg Beach was considered one of the premier training destinations for open-water swimmers and triathletes. The beach had hosted numerous international competitions and was a regular training ground for Olympic athletes. The beach was already showing signs of early morning activity, a few dedicated surfers checking the waves at nearby Surfers' Corner, and the occasional jogger making their way along the pristine shoreline. Cordelia had deliberately chosen to start her swim at 6:30 a.m., well before the crowds arrived, but also before the shark spotters took their positions at 8 a.m. The decision to swim before the shark spotters were on duty was calculated. Cordelia had read that early morning conditions were often ideal for training, with calmer waters and fewer crowds. The shark spotter program was relatively new, and many experienced swimmers had been training in these waters for years without incident. She felt that her research and preparation had adequately addressed the risks. Her training plan called for a challenging 3-mile swim parallel to the shore, staying within the protected swimming area that was clearly marked by buoys and warning signs. She had studied the currents carefully and knew that staying close to shore would keep her in the safest possible conditions. The water temperature was perfect, and visibility was excellent. Everything seemed ideal for a productive training session. What she hadn't accounted for were the strong offshore currents that had developed overnight, invisible from the surface, but powerful enough to pull even strong swimmers into deeper water. These currents were particularly deceptive because they operated below the surface, gradually drawing swimmers seaward without them realizing what was happening until it was too late. The currents around Muizenberg were influenced by a complex interaction of tides, wind patterns, and underwater topography. While generally predictable, they could change rapidly based on weather conditions and seasonal variations. Local swimmers knew to constantly check their position relative to shore landmarks, but visitors often underestimated how quickly the currents could carry them off course. After 40 minutes of steady swimming, maintaining what she thought was a course parallel to the beach, Cordelia realized something was terribly wrong. Despite her efforts to stay within the designated safe zone, she found herself 600 yards offshore in 30 feet of water, well beyond the protected swimming area. The current had been gradually pulling her seaward, so subtly that she hadn't noticed until she was already in danger. Now she was in exactly the kind of deep water that the safety zones were designed to help swimmers avoid. The water around Muizenberg was part of False Bay, a large bay system that served as a nursery area for various marine species, including young great white sharks. The bay's protected waters and abundant food sources made it an ideal habitat for juvenile sharks learning to hunt. During certain times of the year, the concentration of young great whites in the bay could be quite high. What Cordelia didn't know was that juvenile great whites are actually more dangerous to humans than adults in many ways. While adult great whites typically avoid humans after an initial investigative bite, juveniles are less experienced at distinguishing between different types of prey. They're also more aggressive and persistent, lacking the learned caution that comes with age and experience. Young great whites are still developing their hunting skills and are more likely to make mistakes in prey identification, often attacking multiple times rather than retreating after an initial bite. As she kicked desperately toward shore, fighting against the current that had pulled her into danger, a 14-foot juvenile great white was hunting in the area during the early morning feeding period. The young shark, inexperienced in distinguishing between seals and humans, was attracted by Cordelia's rhythmic kicking and the electrical impulses generated by her rapidly beating heart. To the juvenile predator, her frantic movements looked exactly like a wounded seal struggling at the surface. The attack came without warning, as they always do. The juvenile great white struck Cordelia's legs as she fought to swim back toward the safety of shallow water. Unlike an adult shark that might bite once and retreat upon realizing its mistake, this young predator was particularly aggressive and persistent, attacking multiple times as Cordelia screamed and tried to fight it off. Her cries for help carried across the water to the early morning surfers at nearby Surfers' Corner. Two experienced local surfers immediately recognized the sound of distress and paddled toward her on their boards. The first surfer reached Cordelia within 4 minutes, helping to pull her onto his board while scanning the water for any sign of the shark. But the damage was already beyond repair. The juvenile's repeated attacks had caused massive trauma to both legs, with major arterial damage that was causing her to lose blood at an alarming rate. Despite the surfer's immediate first aid efforts and a rapid rescue to the beach, Cordelia had lost too much blood to survive. She died from hemorrhagic shock just 12 minutes after the attack, even as paramedics arrived on the scene and began advanced life support measures. The beach rescue team worked frantically to save her life, but the blood loss from the multiple shark bites had been too severe to overcome. The tragedy led to immediate changes in safety protocols at Muizenberg Beach, with shark spotters now deployed during peak training hours and enhanced warning systems for swimmers about the dangers of offshore currents. Additional safety measures included improved signage about current conditions and mandatory safety briefings for early morning swimmers. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.